This is the Helpful Art Teacher with my tutorial on how to create a plaster cake. Day 1. This is the template. Cut out the separate pieces. I had the separate pieces traced onto an old cardboard box, cut them out, and just tape them together. I used separate pieces rather than a pattern that could all connect together because it's easier to lay them out on a cardboard box and make the most of the space without wasting any extra cardboard. Otherwise, you're just restricted to the bigger boxes, and sometimes a smaller box works just as well. So you connect them. Just use an old recycled cereal box or oatmeal box. The link to the pattern is in the video description. After you connect them and you have the basic template, the next step is that you're going to cover the whole thing with tin foil. And the purpose of that is to prevent the plaster craft from soaking into the cardboard and collapsing it. So when you wrap the tin foil around, try and wrap it neatly like you're wrapping a present. You don't want it to be lumpy or crumbly. The plaster craft is messy, so you're going to want to put newspaper down on your table, or in my case I used an old plastic bag, and I just laid it on the surface of the table so that the plaster didn't ruin my table. The bottom is where you'd write your name, so pick the sloppiest side as the bottom and then flip it over. Notice I have the plaster strips and the warm water. You don't want to use cold water. It'll set much faster if you use warm water. And notice I have a very large piece of plaster and I'm wrapping it around again like you're wrapping a present. Try and do it as smoothly as possible. When you smooth it on, you want to smooth it until the little holes disappear. If you don't smooth it on, it's going to kind of look like a mummy that's been unwrapped. And notice the plastic bag protecting the table. You could use newspaper as well. And notice that I smooth it until all the holes are gone before I add the next piece. You have to do it immediately. Plaster, when it hits the warm water, goes through a chemical reaction that causes it to harden, but it can only go through that reaction once. Once the molecules rearrange themselves, it's permanently hardened, and even if you re-wet it, you're not going to be able to smooth it down. So you only have a very short window of time to smooth it. Once the plaster is dry, I put a mixture of joint compound, acrylic paint, and wood glue. And I'm going to show you the proportions. So you take a plastic container and you put maybe 3/4 of the way with joint compound, and then you're going to cover the entire top with acrylic paint. You're going to mix it, you're going to mix it, you're going to mix it, and it's going to probably look a little too dry. If you leave it that way, it'll crack when it dries, so you add more acrylic paint and you keep mixing it until it has a creamy texture, kind of like real frosting. And that's important because it won't crack when it dries. Now, joint compound by itself takes forever to dry, so you add about 2 tablespoons worth of wood glue, and that's going to hasten the drying time. And it creates this very smooth frosting. So I'm putting it on with my fingers, and then I'm smoothing it with a fork to give it texture. With a plastic knife, you can use a putty knife to give a nice texture to it. Don't put it on too thick because it will crack as it dries. And again, with plaster, once it hardens, you can't re-wet it and re-smooth it. You have to just patch on top of it. So here you see I'm snipping the corner of a plastic bag to create a pastry bag, but actually what you can do is you can take the point of a pastry nib, like from an actual real pastry bag, and put it through the corner of the plastic bag and just kind of shove it through, and you can actually create an actual pastry effect. And then at the end, you just throw away the plastic bag and you clean out the tip. Here I'm using Crayola Model Magic to create the flowers. I'm going to paint them later, so I'm just using white. This is how you make a rose. See how I'm curling it up? And then you kind of squeeze the ends of the petals to make them a little thinner and more delicate looking. You can make little leaves, just flatten it and cut stuff out. And then you can actually stick that right into the plaster, or you can wait till everything dries and use a hot glue gun to attach everything. In my classroom, I use low temperature hot glue guns, and the kids have no problem with them. They don't burn themselves. You can attach extra petals, a leaf. Here I'm making a strawberry. So I'm going to use a toothpick to make the little seeds. And I'm going to flatten a piece and use that to make the little green top of the strawberry. A toothpick is a great modeling tool. You can use it to texturize stuff. Here are some plaster cakes that the students made. For the cake, we used tempera paint, which has a matte surface. And when we painted the frosting, we actually mixed a little bit of Mod Podge in with acrylic paint to give it a glossy effect. So parts of the cake were glossy and parts were matte, so that the cakes really were very convincing. A lot of people thought they were real. I did this with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and the kids really enjoyed doing it. The cakes turned out beautiful, they were very convincing, and they looked truly lovely in the display case.